And so picking up where we left off, we're still on this page, which starts with this amazing letter E, really beautifully flourished, historical, English roundhand, majuscule E. And we got through quite a lot of the letters and we saw these amazing variations coming in with lots of additional flourishing. A really beautiful alteration in the way that we approach a line of universal beauty. And so we're going to start from here. So let's get started. So some of these letters are written at 2, and some are written at 3. So I'm just marking off the 2 and 3. I love this crossbar. So now if we did this a little bit bigger, in the manuscript, in the Writing Master copybook that I looked at, notice I've changed the angle of my pen. I saw this. So that's quite odd because, you know, historically, what you will not do when you're dealing with flourishing, most flourish, there are 3 basic starting rules to flourishes. That's 2 thin lines can cross each other, a thick and a thin line should cross each other, but 2 thick lines cannot cross each other. Now, I've come up with an exception to this rule. 2 thick lines can cross each other, but they can't cross each other at the thickest points. So it's sort of between a thick and a thin should cross each other. So how does this work? Now it could be that the ink just pooled. Or if you look at the letter, you'll see that the line is getting thicker at the base. And maybe the weight is actually here. The principal amount of deposition is on this part of the stroke rather than the center of it. Lots of possibilities. And this is just one letter, one absolutely tiny structure in this letter. So let's look at 2 more variations. Just having a little bit of extra play there. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the most amazing things that I've come across in the study of these historical 17th, 18th and 19th century English roundhand letter forms is the conjoining of shapes. I might need a little more space for this. And notice I keep marking off so I know where I'm working. So this is an IP. Oh, so I'm mapping this out now. 2, so this should be here. And this should be here. It's a little bit on the high side, so let's try that again. So notice the internal space. I also think, you know, one of the things I'm doing is I'm going back to that 55 degree that I always work off of. So I want to make this a combination Brilliant. Much better. Much more balanced. Again, in the 17th century, you find a lot of these ligatures. So let's say we've written on Saturday. Typical O from the 17th century. And I'm setting myself up here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So a really odd sort of conjoining ligature, which is basically that part on an H added to a sort of conjoined ligature from a word into the S, because of course the S is this. So instead of having this, you have this. Let's just go down a line. Which of course looks like a Y. So I'm not sure if you noticed that I started with the pen. Look at where the nib is. It's not facing the 55. The nib is there. So we get a hairline on the line of universal beauty. Oh, this is a stunning L. Oh, I loved this L. You know, it's funny when I'm writing them, I remember when I first saw them. The next few letters are really quite fascinating because they really start to help you to see how these writing masters really loved to play with the letter forms. Now, this is quite difficult to do for a number of reasons. The first reason is I'm already facing the direction that the nib can spread. So technically, I'm just going to keep that direction. I'm just going to show you something here. So technically, I could do this, which is where you think the weight would be, rather than just at the top. So it really forces you to have a lot more control over yourself. Because, you know, the first thing you want to do is just press. Now, again, I'm on the 55. So the example that I have is actually off the 55. And it's a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to set that up. This is such a beautiful little tea. It's so cute. Notice, I'm not even here. I'm actually, you should be able to see the underside of the nib. And again, another bit of conjoining, which requires a little bit of setting up. So quite a lot of tool manipulation. So if we look at that again, what we see is, we see a hairline. So again, I'm not on the 55. I'm actually perpendicular to the 55. So I'm using my wrist because, you know, I have a large hand, so I can use my wrist to produce these shapes. But ideally, you really want to use your arm for this kind of movement. And I can feel the nib is really, you know, a lot scratchier than it should be. So that tells me that I need to change the nib. Well, I should have changed it by now. It's still producing beautiful letterforms, but it's not as fine as it used to be. And remember, these 17th, 18th, and 19th century English roundhand letters tend to be rounder as opposed to elliptical. Okay, I'm just setting this letter up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Oh, stay on the line. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Okay. And lift and turn and go back in and out. So lovely. Oh, right, on to the next page. So I have quite a few of these L variations. And the plotting of the shape is really quite difficult. So this is, so notice I keep marking off the line. This is going to come from here. Takes quite a lot to sort of do this. I did try to do it backwards. It's a lot harder than it looks. And it's sort of reminiscent of a letter S. Really quite fascinating, this shape. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Now, there are variations. You can go up and over and down to a point, and up and over and back under and through. The only problem with this kind of shape is it can be mistaken to be an N or two A's. So the context is really important, but you should be able to distinguish the letter just by looking at the letter itself. So that sort of falls to, again, working on that 55. So that's the kind of shape that we can see we would find in these kinds of letters. I'm just going to finish off this line. And notice the weight is up here. There's two sets of these kinds of shapes. So you can do this. And then lift up. And come back and finish off there. There's a beautiful J on this page. Up and a little wiggle and back down and out. So I hope that's given you a lot more letter forms to look into and a lot more interest in these 17th, 18th and 19th century English roundhand letter forms.